Have you ever been told you don't belong not because of what you did, but because of what you look like? You pay for your seat, dress the part, carry yourself with quiet dignity. Yet, the moment you sit down, someone towers over you, claiming you don't deserve to be there. It's not just a seat they're trying to take, it's your worth, your place, your right to exist in that space. And as the stares burn into your skin, the shame, the helpless anger, the exhaustion, it's a pain you know too well. But what if you could turn that pain into something more? What if you could turn humiliation into power? What if, in that exact moment when they try to push you out, you stand your ground, not with shouting, not with rage, but with the kind of quiet that shakes an entire room? What if your calm refusal could change the rules, not just for you, but for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong? This is where the story turns. Meet Kendra Lewis. On a rainy Tuesday morning, dressed in a cream-colored suit that whispered success, she boarded Flight 237 to New York, ticket in hand, ready for a meeting that could shift millions. But before the wheels even left the ground, a red-faced man stood over her, jabbing at his crumpled boarding pass, demanding her seat. Around them, whispers grew. The flight crew glanced, hesitated, and then quietly took his side. They thought she was just another woman sitting where she shouldn't. They had no idea who she really was. Because Kendra Lewis wasn't just another passenger, she wasn't even just another business-class traveler. She was the woman who owned the airline. And that's where this story begins, with one seat, one stranger, and a quiet storm that would transform an entire industry. If you've ever witnessed injustice like this, share this story. Subscribe. Because this isn't just a story about a seat, it's about power, dignity, and what happens when someone decides they're done being told they don't belong. Now, let's step onto Flight 237, where everything changed. Kendra Lewis sat in seat 2A as if this business-class cabin had been built just for her. Her cream-colored suit hugged her graceful frame, her polished heels quietly declaring that she belonged to a world few could reach. Her hair was neatly tied back, her face free of heavy makeup but radiating the quiet confidence of a woman who had walked through hundreds of boardrooms under skeptical eyes. Kendra was always ready for those looks. She just didn't expect to find them on an airplane. Harold Benton approached, a middle-aged white man in a wrinkled polo, standing with the posture of someone who always assumed he was right. He stopped right in front of Kendra, slapped his ticket down on the tray table with a loud smack, and said, his tone sharp with irritation, "You're in my seat. This is mine." The sound was like a stone dropped into a still pond. A few passengers turned their heads, their eyes scanning the scene. From behind, a voice whispered, deliberately loud enough for Kendra to hear. She probably sat in the wrong seat. Kendra didn't look up right away. She turned a page of the book in her hand, her slender finger pausing at the edge of the paper as if weighing whether this moment was even worth reacting to. Silent, but not submissive. Harold stepped closer, his shadow blocking the soft yellow light that fell across Kendra's face. "I said this is my seat. How long are you planning to stay there?" Kendra finally looked up, her gaze calm as ice. One glance was enough to make Harold hesitate slightly, but not enough to make him step back. She didn't rush to explain, didn't show a flicker of embarrassment. She simply tilted her head, as if observing a performance that was both inconvenient and boring. The murmurs began to spread through the cabin. This is annoying. People like this are always the same. Someone pulled out a phone. Kendra noticed the camera lens pointed at her. Not surprising. These days, any incident on a plane could become online entertainment within minutes. Still, she remained seated, composed, as if none of their stares could reach her. A thought flickered through her mind, this is just a seat, but to him, it's a test of power. Harold took a deep breath, ready to speak again, while others silently began betting how far this would go. Then Kendra closed her book, slowly turned toward Harold, her gaze no longer cold but sharp like a freshly honed blade. She spoke, her voice just loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Are you sure?" A simple question, but suddenly, the air turned heavy. And this was only the beginning. Kendra didn't answer right away. She just raised one eyebrow, her expression calm as if she were watching a fly buzz around a dinner table, not a man trying to push her out of her seat. That calmness, strangely, didn't cool things down. It was like pouring fuel on the fire. Harold grew more agitated. He was used to people apologizing when called out, used to people going silent when he raised his voice. But in front of him now was a woman who didn't shrink and didn't rage. A voice rang out from the row behind them. Quick, clear, completely unbothered. "Y'all, look at this. Seat 2A is about to get interesting." The speaker was Serena Ngo, a young Asian woman in her 20s, holding up her phone as she live-streamed. Her camera caught every raised brow, every gesture between Kendra and Harold. She continued, half commentary, half mockery. "A man is trying to kick a woman out of her seat. Business class really is the place to study human rights." Kendra glanced at the phone. The small screen glowed, reflecting her face, along with a stream of fast-scrolling comments. "Kick her out. She doesn't look like she belongs in business class. Dressing nice doesn't mean you can afford the ticket. Want to bet who's getting dragged off the plane?" The world outside, only a few centimeters away through that screen, was already passing judgment without knowing a thing about her. They didn't see the ticket in her wallet. They didn't see the countless hours of work that earned her this seat. All they saw was a black woman in 2A, and that was enough for them to doubt her. Harold glanced at Serena, emboldened by those comments. He smirked. "See? Even they know you don't belong here." Kendra still said nothing. She tilted her head slightly, watching Harold with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying a rare insect. Her silence unnerved him. He wanted her to snap. He wanted her to yell, to prove him right. Instead, she let him keep talking, let him expose what he truly believed. Across the aisle, another passenger raised a phone to record. The cameras were on her now, but Kendra no longer cared. She knew all these eyes were acting like judges. But she also knew one thing: none of them were ready for what was about to happen. And that was exactly why she stayed silent. Let them grow confident. Let them expose themselves. Because none of them knew this silence was about to shake the entire cabin. The soft click of heels on the floor announced a new arrival. A flight attendant approached, her polite smile unable to hide the tension in her voice. "Ma'am, to avoid disturbing the other passengers, could you please move to another seat? We can arrange a more suitable spot for you." Kendra slowly turned her head, her eyes pausing on the name tag pinned to the attendant's uniform, as if carefully reading each letter. Then she looked straight at Harold, unblinking, unflinching. "This is my seat." The words weren't loud, they weren't sharp, but they landed with the weight of a gavel hitting a judge's bench. Harold smirked, a smile half sarcastic, half triumphant. "Keep saying that, but everyone here knows who really belongs in this seat." The statement was like throwing a match into gasoline. The whispers erupted across the cabin. "She probably bought a coach ticket and snuck up here. I don't know why they don't check more carefully." Kendra heard every word. Each judgment cut through the air like a knife, but instead of shrinking, she straightened her back, as if those words were the very thing holding her steady. Behind her, Serena didn't miss a moment. "Y'all see this?" she said into her phone, excitement bubbling in her voice. "This is getting wild. Seat 2A is on fire right now." The live stream view count shot up. 300, 400, then 500. The comments poured in non-stop. "Throw her out. This is why I hate flying business class. This is going viral, for sure." Harold turned to Serena, feeding off the digital crowd's support. "See," he said loudly, making sure the whole cabin heard, "Everyone agrees with me." Kendra still didn't respond. She opened her bag, pulled out a neatly folded ticket, and placed it on the tray table with a deliberate, slow motion. A strange hush spread through the cabin. No one looked away. Then she lifted her head, her gaze cutting straight through Harold. "Are you sure you want to keep going?" The question wasn't just for Harold. It echoed through the cabin, through every phone screen watching the live stream. A question that seemed simple, but carried a warning. And in that moment, something unexpected began to form. A storm no one saw coming. Because Kendra Lewis had more than just one ticket to prove she belonged in this seat. Why do they always have to make a scene? The voice came from row 3, loud enough for everyone in the cabin to hear. A middle-aged white man leaned toward his wife, but the words weren't just for her. They were aimed like an arrow straight at Kendra. She heard it all. Every word, each syllable dripping onto the cold floor. Kendra didn't turn her head, didn't react. But inside, a familiar voice rose up steady, rhythmic, like a prayer she'd memorized long ago. "How many times has my very presence been challenged just because of this skin? How many times have I been treated like a stranger in the very spaces I belong?" She'd lived through moments like this more times than she cared to count. In boardrooms, where men smiled politely but still saw her as an intruder. In upscale restaurants, where waiters greeted every table but hers. On flights like this one, where even a business class ticket wasn't enough to make people believe she belonged in the seat she'd earned. Kendra glanced out the window. The sky was dull and gray. A fitting backdrop for a tired old play whose lines she knew by heart. Harold was still standing there, his hand clutching his ticket, veins on his neck straining like a rope pulled too tight. And the other passengers, they weren't just bystanders. They were a self-appointed jury, whispering their verdict. Does she deserve to sit here? She drew a deep breath, steady. This wasn't about a seat anymore. This was an audition yet again to prove her right to exist in a space others thought wasn't hers. And this time, the audience wasn't just a few wandering eyes, it was hundreds of people, watching through Serena's live stream in the row behind her. Somewhere back there, the rapid clicks of typing, the comments were piling up. She didn't need to look to know what they said. Words born of snap judgments and bias soaked deep into the bone. She doesn't belong here. Kick her out. Kendra rested one hand on the armrest, tapping lightly. She was silent, but her silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The breath before the storm. Because what they didn't understand was this. She wasn't here to ask for anyone's permission to exist. And very soon, they were going to learn that, in a way no one in this cabin could imagine. The flight attendant stood stiffly, trying to keep her voice polite, though every word dropped like lead. "Ma'am, please cooperate. We'll find another seat more suitable for you." The way she stressed the word suitable made Kendra tilt her head. Suitable, a word dressed up as customer service, but really just a polite way to say, this place isn't for you. The air in the cabin thickened. Serena, still wearing that half-mocking, half-thrilled grin, raised her phone higher. "Y'all, listen to this," she said loud enough for both the live stream and the entire cabin to hear. Someone just commented, bet she didn't even pay for that seat. A few chuckles bubbled up from the back rows. Harold turned to Serena, smiling in agreement, then folded his arms and flicked his wrist as if confirming some universal truth. Finally, someone said it out loud. The words scraped like a dull blade across Kendra's patience. Harold wasn't just a passenger demanding his seat anymore. He was performing. And the entire cabin had become his stage, with Kendra cast as the unwilling supporting character the role they'd all assumed was hers. She sat there, one hand resting lightly on the neatly folded ticket in front of her. Every word she heard, every glance she felt, only anchored her more deeply. But she didn't pay for that seat. To them, a harmless comment. To her, an echo of years of bias. Her success always questioned. Her presence always doubted. Her accomplishments always dismissed as luck or a favor. She didn't respond to Harold, didn't look at Serena. Instead, Kendra locked eyes with the flight attendant and gave a thin, polite smile, one that made the woman falter just slightly. "Do you know who I am?" Kendra asked. Her voice was even, low, like a quiet challenge. The attendant froze. Her eyes blinked rapidly, not because she knew the answer, but because she sensed something behind that question. Something no one in this cabin was ready to hear. Harold burst out laughing. "Oh, please, don't play that card. Stop pretending you're someone important." Kendra tilted her head, her gaze tracing Harold as if studying a child throwing a tantrum for attention. "You seem pretty sure about that, don't you?" A question that sounded light but made Harold pause for just half a second. Then Kendra closed her eyes briefly, drawing in a deep breath. She knew this wasn't the climax. Not yet, but it was coming. Close, very close, and when it came, no one in this cabin would be laughing. The tension in the air felt like a violin string stretched to the edge of snapping. Every eye locked on Kendra, waiting for her to react. Serena lowered her voice, but kept the phone aimed forward, capturing every detail. Harold stood with his arms folded, shoulders squared like he still controlled the scene. Kendra leaned forward, opening her bag, her movements slow, deliberate like a poker player turning over cards one by one in a silent room. She pulled out her boarding pass, carefully unfolding it, smoothing each crease before handing it to the flight attendant. "This is my ticket, seat 2A. The attendant took it, eyes flicking over the bold print, and then she froze. "Kendra Lewis, seat 2A, perfectly valid." A hush fell over the cabin. It was as if the whole room lost its ability to make a sound. The attendant swallowed hard, about to speak, then stopped. Serena raised her phone even higher, exclaiming like a commentator at a sports match. "Oh my God, it's real. Her ticket says 2A. Did y'all see that?" But Harold, instead of backing down, dug in deeper. He sneered, his voice loud enough for the back rows. "She probably swapped seats with someone. Look at her." The words landed like a stone dropped into water, sending ripples across the cabin. A man in row 4 nodded in agreement. A woman whispered, "That's exactly what I thought." Look at her. Not an argument. A sentence as sharp as a verdict. With just 4 words. Harold had turned Kendra from a rightful passenger into an imposter. No evidence needed. No reason. Just the way she looked. Kendra didn't flinch. She took her ticket back from the attendant, set it neatly on the tray table in front of her, a visible, undeniable fact for anyone to see. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself. Her silence had transformed into something else entirely, a form of power that made Harold and the others squirm, because they couldn't control it. Serena leaned toward her camera, whispering like she was letting the audience in on a secret, "This story's about to flip. I can feel it." And Serena was right. Because when a woman like Kendra Lewis decides not only to sit in her seat, but to sit there with the unshakable poise of someone untouchable, what comes next isn't just an argument over a seat. It's a lesson. And everyone on this flight, including Harold, was about to learn it in a way they would never forget. The cockpit door swung open. No one in the cabin even breathed when they saw who stepped out. Captain Rhodes. He strode toward seat 2A with the calm authority of someone who never needed to explain his power. Tall, broad-shouldered, his polished black shoes tapped out a steady rhythm on the floor, each step echoing in the already suffocating air. "Ma'am?" His deep voice cut through the silence, final and uncompromising. "You can either change your seat or leave the plane. The air grew heavier. The other passengers turned toward Kendra. No more curious glances. These were the eyes of people waiting to see her fold. Harold leaned back in a nearby seat, arms crossed, lips curling into a triumphant grin. He didn't need to say a word. The captain's presence was the ending Harold wanted for this scene. She'd be forced off. He'd be proven right. From the back, Serena whispered into her phone, but loud enough for the whole cabin. "Oh my God." The captain himself came out. C2A is about to explode. The live stream numbers spiked. Comments flew by. "Kick her off already. See, even the captain knows she's in the wrong. Bet she's gonna cry any second." Kendra didn't cry. She didn't speak. She sat perfectly still, back straight, hands resting on her thighs, like her body had turned to stone. The silence dragged on longer than anyone could tolerate, long enough to make Harold's smug remarks and the murmurs from the back row feel naked. Kendra met Captain Rhodes's gaze, her face calm. She didn't see a captain carrying out his duty. She saw a man delivering a judgment he believed was fair without realizing he was standing on a side he'd never had to question. She exhaled softly. A thin, deliberate smile tugged at her lips. Not the smile of surrender, the smile of someone holding a card no one else knew was in play. Harold cleared his throat, shattering the moment. "See, I told you?" "Finally, this little game is over." Kendra tilted her head toward him, studying him like a child too confident in a game he didn't understand. "Yes, Harold," she thought, "it's ending, but not the way you think." And in a moment, everyone would learn exactly whose seat this really was in every sense of the word. Kendra placed her hands on the armrests, then slowly stood up. That simple movement was enough to make the entire cabin hold its breath. Phones lifted higher, lenses zoomed in, capturing every shift of her expression. Not a single eye blinked. Even Harold instinctively stepped back, not out of fear, but because this didn't look like the scene he'd scripted in his head. She wasn't flailing, she wasn't begging, she wasn't angry. She stood with the composure of someone who had been in control all along. Serena's voice rang out from the back, higher pitched, buzzing with excitement. "Y'all, look, she's standing up. Seat 2A just hit 5,000 viewers." The glow of Serena's phone lit up her face against the warm cabin lights. Comments poured in. "She's about to get dragged off. This is wild. Even the captain had to step in. Someone filmed from another angle. This is gold." Some passengers leaned toward each other, whispering. "You know how this ends. People like her never win." Kendra heard it all. She didn't react. But every word, every stare lined up like fuel ready to ignite. People like her. That phrase clanged inside her like an old, rusted blade, the same one society had dragged across her skin for decades to remind her, "You don't belong here." Captain Rhodes stepped closer, as if preparing for his final move. Harold leaned forward, voice dripping with satisfaction. "You'd better get off now. Don't make this worse." Kendra turned to him. Her eyes weren't angry, they weren't weak. They were so calm it was unsettling, like she was watching him embarrass himself in a play too small for her stage. Then she faced Captain Rhodes again. Their eyes locked. The moment stretched long enough for everyone to realize this wasn't about a seat anymore. She drew in a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and smiled. Not the smile of someone about to give up. The smile of someone about to end the game. Serena whispered into the mic, half to her viewers, half to herself. "Oh my God, something's about to happen." And she was right. Because in just a moment, everyone in this cabin, Harold, Captain Rhodes, and the thousands watching online would learn what it meant to misjudge Kendra Lewis. Kendra bent down, opened her bag. Her movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, like a poker player flipping their final card. The whispers died. Only the soft scrape of her nails against leather filled the silence. Then she pulled out a thick crimson envelope, heavy, sealed with an embossed crest. Its bold color cut through the beige business-class palette like a slash of lipstick on cold marble. She handed it to Captain Rhodes, her voice even. Resolute. Captain. You might want to read this first. No one said a word. The cabin air was so dense it felt unbreathable. Rhodes blinked, taking the envelope. His broad fingers trembled slightly as they brushed the seal. Harold squinted, his brow furrowed with confusion and irritation. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice cracking just a little. Kendra didn't answer. She stood tall, hands clasped in front of her, as if giving them one last chance to realize the size of their mistake. "From the back," Serena whispered, voice hushed but clear enough for everyone to hear. "She's about to drop a bomb." The live stream went wild. "What's in the envelope? I swear she's about to flip the whole thing. This is about to get good." Captain Rhodes opened it. The paper inside slid across his hands like a blade of ice. He read it once, then again slower, like he couldn't believe what his own eyes told him. The assured look on his face melted away, replaced by something else. Shock. Harold leaned forward, impatient. "Well, read it out loud. Tell her to get off already." But Captain Rhodes didn't answer. He stood up straighter, folded the document carefully, and, for the first time since stepping out of the cockpit, he looked at Kendra with completely different eyes. Kendra tilted her head slightly. Her lips curled into a razor-thin smile, the kind you give when you know the entire room just shifted in your favor. And in that pregnant silence, everyone understood one thing. The game had just changed. But how? That was what kept every single eye, every single camera glued to Kendra Lewis. Captain Rhodes held the paper longer than necessary. He read it again, his eyes scanning each line as if the truth on that page was too heavy to process. The man who commanded an entire flight crew, who'd logged thousands of hours across turbulent skies, now stood frozen as if someone had drained every ounce of authority from his veins. Kendra remained where she was, quietly observing. She didn't ask if he'd finished reading. She didn't need to. She could see the shift in his eyes, the iron confidence melting into stunned uncertainty. And that was her cue. "Congratulations." "Captain," she said, her voice steady and low, each word pronounced like she was marking a milestone. "You just tried to throw your new boss off her own plane." The sound hit the cabin like a punch to the chest. Whispers erupted instantly, buzzing like a hive of startled bees. Someone gasped. "Wait, what, her boss?" Harold's smug expression twisted into confusion. He turned to Captain Rhodes, his voice cracking. "What? What is she talking about?" Captain Rhodes didn't answer. His hands still clutched the document so tightly that his knuckles blanched. From the back row, Serena, still live-streaming, leaned forward, capturing every frame. Her voice exploded with giddy disbelief. "Oh my God, y'all heard that? She said she's their new boss. Seat 2A just blew up." Kendra took a step forward, plucking the envelope from Rhodes's hands and slipping it back into her bag with the same calmness as if nothing had happened. Then she turned to Harold. "Now then, Mr. Benton." She paused, savoring the silence that was gripping the entire cabin. "Perhaps you'd like to rethink how you address passengers on my plane." A chorus of gasps filled the air. Phones shot higher. Lenses zoomed in on the woman who had just flipped the entire power dynamic with a single sentence. Harold's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The allies who'd smirked with him earlier were now mute. And the passengers who had been silent spectators were staring at Kendra differently with a mix of shock and something dangerously close to respect. Kendra adjusted her collar. The tap of her heels against the cabin floor rang like punctuation at the end of an argument no one dared continue. But this wasn't the end. She'd just made her opening move. And anyone paying attention could tell this game of power had only begun. "What? No, that can't be," Harold barked suddenly. His voice climbing into a desperate pitch, he whipped his head around, searching for a nod, a smirk, anything to reassure him this wasn't real. The flight attendant, still standing nearby, hesitated, then drew a breath. Her voice wavered, but carried clearly, "Sir, the document confirms her identity. She is Kendra Lewis, chairwoman of Horizon Equity, the group that owns this airline." The words drained the cabin of air. Several passengers gasped. A man nearby muttered an expletive under his breath. Harold froze, eyes wide, his face reddening as though someone had slapped him in front of the entire plane. In the back row, Serena practically leapt from her seat like she was watching the final play of a championship game. "Do you guys hear this?" she shouted into her phone. "She's the chairwoman of Horizon Equity. She owns this airline. Seat 2A just went nuclear." The viewer count on the live stream skyrocketed 10,000. Comments flew. "No way this is real. She owns the airline, best plot twist of the year. Throw that guy out. Boss." Kendra stayed still, unbothered by the chaos. Her gaze swept back to Harold, and in that moment, he understood exactly where he stood. Not as a man in control, but as someone desperately clutching the last scraps of dignity after insulting a woman who owned the very plane beneath his feet. Harold stammered, voice trembling, If that's true, then you still can't." "Can't? What?" Mr. Benton Kendra cut in, her tone calm yet ringing like a bell. "Can't sit on a plane I own." The question didn't need an answer. The cabin fell silent. No more murmurs of agreement, no more snide commentary. Just the crushing quiet of people who'd witnessed a chessboard flip in an instant. Serena whispered into her mic, voice tinged with awe. "I don't think he has any idea who he just picked a fight with." And she was right. Harold hadn't just been wrong about a seat. He'd just provoked the one person with more authority than anyone on this plane. But Kendra wasn't finished. And what she did next would make the whole cabin forget to breathe. She turned fully to Harold now. No more blurred lines between passenger and antagonist. Her gaze locked onto him, pinning him to his place. "Mr. Benton," she said, each word clipped and deliberate so the entire cabin could hear. "How does it feel to be put in your place by the woman you just disrespected?" The sound vanished from the cabin. The same passengers who had chuckled, whispered, and recorded this like entertainment were now statues. Even Serena, usually buzzing like a commentator, lowered her voice, letting the silence stretch for her viewers. Harold couldn't move. No excuses, no bluster. He just stood there, nailed to the plush carpet of business class, shame crawling hot up his neck and across his face. The man who'd reveled in his imagined victory moments ago now looked like someone who'd been ripped from a throne he never actually sat on. Kendra said nothing more. She didn't need to. Her question still hung in the air like a gavel yet to strike, and Harold was forced to sit in the weight of it. She didn't hurry off. She didn't wait for instructions from Rhodes or anyone else. Kendra simply turned back to her seat. The rhythm of her heels on the floor was an anthem of victory. She sat down in 2A, adjusted her cuffs, and opened her laptop. The glow of the screen reflected off her calm, unbothered face like she'd merely paused for a brief inconvenience before returning to billion-dollar business. Serena practically screamed into her live stream. "Y'all, she didn't even look at him. This isn't the end. This is the beginning." Comments flooded. This is the definition of a silent takedown. We're witnessing a masterclass in power. I want to be her when I grow up. Harold still stood there. But he wasn't the main character anymore. He was just another spectator in the show he started but couldn't control. Kendra typed a few keys, her focus already elsewhere. And everyone on that plane understood. This wasn't revenge. This was the opening act of a lesson Harold and every single witness on that flight would never forget. Kendra closed her laptop as if she'd just wrapped up a minor task before moving on to something more important. She stood, without waiting for anyone's permission. And then her voice cut through the heavy air of business class, not loud, but sharp enough to slice through the tension. This flight isn't taking off until we address what just happened. The words hit like a dropped weight, and silence swallowed the cabin. Harold blinked in disbelief, certain he'd misheard. Captain Rhodes's eyes flickered, as if trying to process whether this was some kind of joke. A few passengers chuckled nervously, until they realized she wasn't joking. "What do you mean?" Harold barked, clawing for the power he'd lost. "You can't." "I can," Kendra cut in, her gaze locking on him like a vice. "And I just did." Captain Rhodes stepped forward, ready to smooth things over, but Kendra turned to him first. Her tone was low, calm, but carried the weight of someone who wasn't defending herself anymore, someone taking control. "Captain, this plane isn't going anywhere until we have a full report on how a paying business-class passenger was humiliated, questioned, and asked to give up the seat she purchased." The cabin froze. No more murmurs backing Harold, no more casual commentary. Now, everyone understood she wasn't just speaking for herself. From the back, Serena was quicker than anyone. She lifted her phone higher, whispering just loud enough for her live stream and the cabin to hear. "Y'all see this? She's not just shutting him down. She's holding the whole flight hostage to make them take responsibility." The live stream exploded with comments. "This is next-level power. If I were there, I'd be on my feet clapping. That's a boss. Period." Kendra didn't smile. She didn't look smug. Her face was unreadable calm, controlled, but anyone paying attention could see what she was really doing. She wasn't fighting for a seat anymore. She was rewriting the rules. This wasn't about Harold, and it wasn't even about the captain. This was about who truly controlled this flight, and Kendra had made it clear it wasn't either of them. Captain Rhodes inhaled sharply, weighing his options, but he didn't rush to speak. Even he knew no one touched Kendra Lewis without bracing for the fallout. And this was only her opening move. The tension pressed down so hard you could hear people breathing. But Kendra didn't care. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and dialed with the casualness of someone making a call from her private office, not the middle of a plane in chaos. "Connect me to the executive vice president," she said, clear and cold, now. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Some ducked their heads, as if witnessing something they weren't meant to see. Captain Rhodes stood off to the side, his jaw tight, fully aware he'd been reduced to a spectator at a scene he'd never been trained to handle. "Edward," Kendra said when the line picked up. Her voice dropped, sharp as glass. "Prepare an emergency meeting for when I land. I want every senior manager present. We have a serious problem with passenger protocol." Serena nearly shrieked into her phone. "Y'all hear that? She just called the VP. This is literally a live drama, and I am living for it." Harold, still chained to his humiliation, finally found his voice. "You can't do this," he blurted, his tone cracking the arrogance replaced by pure panic. Kendra didn't even turn her head. "I can," she said, "and I just did." No elaboration, no apology. Just a door slammed shut in Harold's face. The livestream count jumped. Comments poured in. "This is the definition of a power move. Harold needs to leave before it gets worse. Someone sell tickets to this drama. I'll pay." Kendra ended the call, tucked her phone away, and returned to her seat. People waited for more speech, reassurance, something. But Kendra simply sat, as if she'd just scheduled a multi-million-dollar meeting and didn't see the need to waste another second on this nonsense. Harold opened his mouth, closed it. He was nothing more than a shadow now, dwarfed by the woman he dared to underestimate. And in that moment, the entire cabin understood. This wasn't just about Kendra defending herself. She was rewriting the rules for everyone. And no one knew how far this game would go. While the passengers were still buzzing about the phone call, Kendra motioned for the lead flight attendant. She said something low just for the attendant's ears. The woman froze for half a beat, then nodded quickly, rushing off with her radio. The air thickened. Some passengers sat up, straining to catch what was happening. Serena whispered breathlessly into her phone. "Oh my God, something big's about to happen." Less than a minute later, the flight attendant returned, her face taut, doing her best to mask it. She turned to Harold. "Mr. Benton," she said, her voice clipped and professional, "per Chairwoman Lewis's directive, you are permanently banned from flying on our entire network." The air was sucked out of the cabin. "What?" Harold's voice cracked. His eyes bulged. "You can't do that to me." Kendra didn't stand. She just leaned back, watching him with the cool detachment of someone who'd already won. "I can," she said, "and I did." Harold stammered, desperate for a lifeline. But this is all a misunderstanding. Kendra raised a hand, not loud but final. "Mr. Benton," she said, her tone like a judge delivering a sentence. "This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mishap. This was a test." She let the words hang, then delivered the blow. "And your airline failed it miserably." Serena gasped into her live stream. "That line's going on headlines. Watch." Phones were raised higher. The viewer count 15,000. Comments flying. "This is the cleanest takedown I've ever seen." She talks like her words cut the air. "Harold, apologize before you're buried." Harold, now just a husk of himself, stepped back, his lips moving, but no words forming. He knew he wasn't just humiliated. He was the living example of everything wrong, now on display for the entire world. Kendra turned to Captain Rhodes. Her smile was thin, sharp as a blade. "We won't be taking off until I'm certain this incident will be addressed at the highest level, and you know I have every right to make that demand." Captain Rhodes swallowed hard, then nodded. The cabin was silent. No more whispers, no more defiance. Just one truth no one could deny. Kendra Lewis had just turned a personal confrontation into a public lesson in power and accountability. And the most unsettling part, this still wasn't her final move. The cold white lights of the 42nd floor boardroom reflected off the long walnut table, where Horizon's entire executive team sat in suffocating silence. Outside the window, the city sank under a gray afternoon, but the mood inside was darker still. On the wall, a massive screen displayed bleeding red charts, stock prices plunging by the minute, alongside flashing headlines. "Scandal on Flight 237. Airline faces backlash and C2A tops social media trends." A senior executive, his face gaunt from a morning full of frantic calls, finally broke the silence. "If this keeps up, we could lose millions." The CFO, arms crossed but hands trembling beneath the table, shot back, "Don't say millions. If the federal investigations move in, it'll be 10 times that." The room erupted, overlapping voices arguing, blaming. Customer service took the heat. The communications team was called too slow. Someone even suggested downplaying Kendra's role in the media, a comment that drew a round of looks as if the speaker had just volunteered for public execution. Because everyone knew Kendra Lewis wasn't just an angry customer. She was their chairwoman. And worse, the whole world knew it too. The doors swung open. Kendra walked in. No one said another word. She wasn't wearing the cream-colored business suit from the flight. Now it was a simple black dress, powerful, almost funereal, a deliberate choice, as if to remind them this wasn't just a meeting. It was a funeral for their old ways of doing business. I've reviewed every report, Kendra said, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. Her voice was even, but each word landed like a weight. And I've read everything the media is saying about us. A manager forced a weak smile. We can control the damage if... Kendra raised her hand, cutting him off. Damage doesn't need to be controlled. It needs to be faced. The words hung there as her gaze swept across the room, pinning each of them to their seats. This wasn't an incident. This was proof that our system is rotting from the inside. And I'm not here to put out fires. I'm here to rebuild the house. Silence fell again. But this wasn't the silence of confusion anymore. It was the silence of people realizing the real storm was only just beginning. And they didn't yet know Kendra had been preparing this storm for a long time. Kendra leaned back in her chair, fingers laced together on the table. She didn't need to pound the table or raise her voice. The room already belonged to her. Millions, she repeated, her tone low and chilling. Try hundreds of millions if this goes to court. The words hit like a bullet through the flimsy walls of denial the executives were clinging to. The general counsel on her left swallowed hard. But Kendra wasn't done. And that's just legal exposure. She tilted her head, her eyes drilling into the CFO. Do you want to tell me how much market value we've lost in the last 24 hours? No one answered. 8%, she said herself, her voice dry as ash. That's $380 million wiped out in less than a day, and we all know it'll get worse if we keep reacting like a company trying to cover up instead of fix. Some faces turned red with shame, others paled with fear. I want a new corporate culture policy in 30 days. Kendra spoke slowly, emphasizing each word like she was carving it into stone. Not a policy that sits on paper. One that changes how this airline treats every passenger, every employee. One man dared to speak 30 days. That's impossible. Kendra leaned forward slightly, a faint smile crossing her lips, the kind that made the whole room shiver. Then let me give you another option. She paused, long enough to pull every pair of eyes back to her. I'll sell every share I own and drag this company down with me. It wasn't an empty threat. They all knew it. If Kendra Lewis sold her stake, Horizon would lose its biggest investor. Stock prices would crash. C2A would become only the beginning of a years-long corporate nightmare. Silence. Not of disagreement, but surrender. No one in that room doubted Kendra would do exactly what she said. She leaned back again, her voice calm as ever. The choice is yours. Fix it, or fall. The crowded room had never felt so empty. And that was the moment they all understood. This wasn't just about teaching Harold Benton a lesson. Kendra was teaching an entire corporation. But the question remained, did they have the courage to follow? The meeting had barely adjourned an hour when the news spread faster than the stock could fall. The massive screen in Horizon's internal media room blazed with updates. Federal government opens industry-wide investigation into racial discrimination in aviation. A young manager burst into the boardroom, breathless. It's everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, even the financial networks. And he hesitated, glancing at Kendra as if delivering bad news to an executioner. The Department of Transportation has officially reached out. Whispers broke out. One executive buried his head in his hands. Another muttered about unimaginable fallout. But Kendra said nothing. She stood by the window, staring down at the city below as if watching a massive chessboard where every piece was moving exactly as she intended. Finally, she said softly, just loud enough for the room to hear. It's time. No one dared ask what she meant. Meanwhile, out in the world, Serena Ngo, the young woman who'd live-streamed the entire incident, was living a day she could never have imagined. 2 days ago, she was just a final-year law student, streaming for fun and collecting a few thousand followers. Today, she opened an email from Horizon. We'd like to invite you to join our advisory panel on customer policy reform." Serena couldn't believe it. She took a screenshot and sent it to her best friend. "Is this real, or are they trolling me?" It wasn't a joke. To Kendra, Serena wasn't just a bystander. She was the voice of the passengers the system had pushed to the margins. And Kendra knew if she wanted to change the culture of an entire industry, she'd need people like Serena, people untouched by the corporate rot. That afternoon, Serena arrived at Horizon headquarters, phone in hand, of course, but this time, her live stream was different. Her eyes shone with a new kind of fire. "Y'all, listen up. I'm not just telling the story anymore. I'm helping rewrite the rules. With them." Comments flooded in. "This is real action. Do it for all of us. Kendra and Serena. Power. Duo." Kendra walked in, spotting Serena at the table. She gave her a small, knowing smile. "Welcome to the hardest job you'll ever have." Serena laughed nervously, but the look in Kendra's eyes told her it wasn't a joke. They were about to start a war not just to clean up a scandal, but to shake an entire industry to its core. And they both knew the biggest storms hadn't even arrived yet. Harold appeared on television, but he wasn't the arrogant man who had stood, arms crossed, in business class that day. Now, he sat under the harsh lights of a TV studio, dressed in a pressed gray suit that couldn't hide the exhaustion in his face. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands clasped tightly together as if holding himself from falling apart. I was wrong." His voice trembled, hoarse, each word scraping his throat. "I apologize to Ms. Lewis and to every passenger who had to witness my shameful behavior." It aired live. Clips spread across the internet like wildfire. People who had cheered Harold on during that infamous live stream now left very different comments. "At least he knows he was wrong. This is necessary, but it's not enough." But the real surprise wasn't the apology. The host leaned in, voice calm but loaded. "There are reports you've joined an anti-discrimination organization. Is that true?" Harold nodded, his shoulders sagging as if he'd just dropped a burden. I think. It's time I do something more than just apologize." Social media erupted. Weeks ago, Harold Benton was the poster child for privilege and prejudice. Now, he was trying to rebrand himself as a man seeking redemption, though no one could be sure whether it was sincere or just an attempt to salvage his shattered reputation. On Horizon's 42nd floor. Kendra watched the interview on a massive screen. Her face revealed nothing, but her sharp eyes followed Harold's every twitch. Beside her, Serena smirked. "He's crying like he's auditioning for an Oscar." "Maybe," Kendra said, her voice neither amused nor dismissive. "But if he uses that guilt to actually change, I'll let him." Serena tilted her head, half joking. "So you're going to make him your poster boy for successful redemption?" Kendra turned, the faintest smile on her lips. "No. I'm going to make him a warning that anyone can be changed, under enough pressure." Serena nodded slowly. Below the repost of Harold's interview, the comments kept coming. "He's trying to be better, but is it enough? Prove it, Harold. Words aren't enough. Is this a turning point or just another performance?" But Kendra knew the truth: a public apology wasn't nearly enough to fix a broken culture. It was only the first step toward a bigger question: redemption or ruin. Which path would Harold take? And she knew the coming days would answer it. Serena wasted no time turning her sudden influence into action. The very next day, she opened her laptop and went live from her tiny apartment. She wasn't the cheerful Asian American law student live streaming for fun anymore. She spoke now as a leader of a movement. "It's time," Serena said, staring straight into the lens. "Time to stop talking only about what happened to Kendra Lewis. It's time to talk about what's happened to all of us." A new hashtag appeared on screen: FlyFair. "I want every person who's ever been mistreated on a flight, whether for the color of your skin, your gender, or how you look to share your story. Use #FlyFair. Show them this wasn't an isolated incident. This is a system that needs to change. Comments poured in. Finally, someone's saying I was thrown off a flight for being told I didn't fit the seat. I've been disrespected in business class too. I'm sharing my story. And with one post, a storm began. In just 48 hours, thousands of stories flooded in. Videos, photos, personal accounts, passengers laying bare their humiliations for the world to see. It spread like wildfire. From her 42nd floor office, Kendra watched it unfold. Every story was a living testament. Each one strengthening what she'd been saying all along. This wasn't about one flight, one passenger, or one crew. It was about an entire industry built to favor those who looked the part and discard those who didn't. Other airlines scrambled to contain the damage. Emergency meetings popped up across the industry. One major airline released a statement: "We will be reviewing all customer service policies." Another announced, "We're launching mandatory anti-bias training for all employees." But online, people weren't impressed. The comments were brutal. "Don't just promise, prove it. We want real change, not PR campaigns." Serena hosted live discussions, inviting mistreated passengers to share their stories on air. Each live stream felt like a public hearing, an unfiltered tribunal where the world could finally see the pain and anger the industry had ignored for decades. And then, a major newspaper ran a front-page headline. #FlyFair. How one law student forced an industry to look in the mirror. But Kendra knew this wave had only begun. And if the airlines thought they'd done enough to avoid a crisis, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The phone on Kendra's desk buzzed 3 times before she answered. It wasn't a reporter, it wasn't a panicked investor. It was a calm, steady voice she knew well, someone who only called when things had crossed a line. "Miss Lewis, this is Senator Wallace." Kendra leaned forward, elbows on her desk, eyes fixed on the city glowing in the late afternoon sun. "I'm listening, Senator." "We're preparing to open hearings on racial discrimination in the airline industry," Wallace said, blunt and direct, "and we need you. We need you to testify before Congress." The words hit like a stone thrown into still water. Kendra closed her eyes for a moment, not to think, but to confirm that this moment was real. The senator continued, "What you've done hasn't just changed one airline. You've started a national conversation. And now, we need that conversation in the most powerful room in the country." Kendra stood, walking toward the bookshelf where a framed photo of her mother sat, the woman who had taught her. Power isn't getting a seat at the table. It's changing how the table is built. When Kendra asked, 2 weeks, we'll handle the arrangements." She returned to her desk, picked up a pen, and jotted it on her calendar: congressional hearing. "I'll be there." 4 simple words, but they weren't just an agreement. They were a declaration. The story of Seat 2A wouldn't end with one flight, one scandal, or even one company. It would be etched into the public record of Congress beyond the reach of PR campaigns or scripted apologies. When Serena heard the news, she nearly jumped out of her chair. She went live instantly, her voice trembling with excitement. "Y'all, listen, Kendra Lewis is testifying before Congress. This isn't a movement anymore. This is a revolution." The comments poured in. "She's the voice we need. It's time someone forces the system to answer. I'll be watching every minute of that hearing." Kendra put down her phone and leaned back in her chair. Hands clasped. This time, there was no smile. Because she knew in 2 weeks, she wouldn't just be speaking for herself. She'd be speaking for millions, for everyone who'd ever been pushed aside, told they didn't belong. And when those doors to Congress opened, there would be no turning back. 2 years can transform an entire industry. For Horizon, it did more than that. It erased the image of an airline drowning in scandal and replaced it with a symbol of reform. In the latest rankings by the Civil Rights Alliance, Horizon was named the most inclusive airline in America, from business class lounges to economy seats. No passenger ever has to wonder again if they belong. But Kendra Lewis wasn't at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. She didn't spend her days posing with framed awards hanging in the company's headquarters. Today, she stood somewhere else entirely on a TED Talk stage, where every seat in the auditorium was full, and millions more were watching online. The lights hit her as she walked out. No longer in the cream-colored suit from that fateful flight. Kendra wore a deep blue dress, simple. Strong, the kind of quiet power she used to rebuild Horizon, stripping away the excess and keeping what mattered most, dignity. She stopped center stage, a small, steady smile on her face. The kind of smile everyone who followed the hashtag Seat2A story understood this was the woman who had used silence to bring down an entire system. 2 years ago, Kendra began, her voice carrying evenly across the room. I was just a passenger, asked to give up a seat I'd paid for on a flight operated by the very company I owned. A mix of laughs and sharp intakes of breath rippled through the audience. Some nodded, others whispered. That was the moment that made history. She continued, back then, people asked me, "Why didn't you yell? Why didn't you fight back right away?" And my answer has always been this, because sometimes the greatest power you can show is to do nothing at all. She paused. The room went still, as if holding on to every word. When I sat still on that plane, I wasn't weak. I was giving the system a chance to reveal itself. I let them expose how they treated someone they thought didn't belong. And then, I used that moment to start a change they couldn't stop. Behind her, the screen lit up. Horizon from scandal to standard of inclusion. Kendra looked out over the crowd, her smile now tinged with dry humor. Funny, isn't it? They once wanted me off that seat. Now, they had to rebuild an entire industry to make sure everyone has a seat worth belonging to. Applause erupted, but Kendra knew this talk wasn't just about telling a story. It was to leave them with a question they weren't ready to forget. She walked slowly toward the left side of the stage, stopping near the front row, locking eyes with those watching her closest. I didn't scream, she said, lowering her voice, drawing the room into her quiet. I didn't throw punches. I didn't spit venom at the people who treated me like a stranger on a plane I owned. I simply refused to leave my seat. And that changed everything. A soft sigh escaped from somewhere in the audience. That one sentence, simple but razor-sharp, pulled everyone back to that flight the woman in the cream suit, sitting still, enduring the stares, and turning a quiet moment into a revolution with one red envelope. On the screen behind her, messages began to appear. Thank you for making me feel like I belong. I finally fly without fear. Your courage gave me courage. Kendra turned back toward the crowd. After that day, I received hundreds of letters from passengers of color, from people who boarded planes wondering if they were allowed to exist in that space. They told me that after Seat 2A they felt welcomed, they felt seen. She paused, scanning faces that had fallen silent. There's one letter I still keep on my desk, she said, her voice soft but heavy, from a 12-year-old girl. She wrote, Miss Lewis, I watched your video with my mom. I never thought people like me could sit there, in business class. But now, I believe one day I can. Kendra lowered her head for a brief moment, grounding herself. Then she looked up, her eyes bright. That's why I'm here today, not to tell a personal story, but to say that every action we choose, even when it's just sitting still, can open a door for someone else to walk through. Clips of the talk streamed live on social media. Comments poured in. I'm crying. This is why I love TED Talks. She turned silence into a weapon. I want to learn that. This isn't just a lesson about airlines. This is a lesson about life. Kendra stepped back, sweeping the room with her gaze. But remember, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. When those doors open, it's on us to walk through them. And that is the hardest part. The room held its breath. Everyone knew what was coming next would stay with them long after they left. Kendra stood perfectly still in the center of the stage, letting the silence stretch. She knew sometimes the quiet before a question makes the answer echo louder. Then she stepped toward the edge of the stage, closer to the audience, her eyes fixed on theirs like this conversation was meant for each of them alone. 2 years ago, on that flight, she began, voice low and steady. There were many Harold Bentons. Not just one man trying to force me out of my seat, but a whole system of Harold Benton's people who believed they had the right to decide who sits where, who belongs, and who disappears from their sight. A few heads nodded in the audience. "And I know," Kendra continued, each word sharp as a blade, "they're still out there, in boardrooms, in airplane cabins, in decisions that shape the lives of millions." She took a deep breath, then let a small, knowing smile creep across her face. "But I also know there are people who refuse to accept that, people who choose to stand up, or sometimes simply sit still and force the world to see them." She stopped, stepped into the brightest light, leaning in as if to close the gap between her and the audience. "So, in a world full of Harold Bentons, who will you choose to be?" The room froze. It wasn't a question meant to be answered here. It was a question to take home, to wrestle with, to confront every time you face injustice, big or small. Behind her, the screen went black, leaving just 2 white lines. #QuietPower, #Seat2A. Kendra stepped back, nodding her thanks to the audience. She didn't need gratitude, she didn't need applause. But it came crashing over her like a tidal wave. In the corner of the room, Serena, no longer just a law student live streaming, but now an official advisor on cultural reform for the airline industry, captured the moment. She knew this clip would go viral, not just as a TED Talk, but as a manifesto that quiet power can shake an entire system. And online, the hashtags #QuietPower and C2A exploded. People weren't just talking about Kendra Lewis anymore. They were talking about themselves, about how they would act, or stay still, to change what once felt immovable. The talk ended, but Kendra's question still echoed, heavy as a challenge. In a world full of Harold Bentons, who will you choose to be? If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.